Vincent Carroll speaking, tutorial number 25. This tutorial is about liver manifesting on the tongue. How many textbooks have you read where it's mentioned that liver stagnation produces a red rolled edges around the tongue? Well, it depends. I mean, it might be more red than rolled or more rolled than red. What exactly do we mean? Well, for those of us who stagnate our liver qi, in other words, the liver qi remains trapped within the lower jiao, then the middle jiao, then the upper jiao, and there is a tendency not to express yourself. There's a tendency to bottle things in. There's a tendency to probably not state your cherished position with the forthrightness that you might wish to do so. You're inclined to bottle things in and hope the problem goes away. If you're like that, then the likelihood is that your tongue will be more rolled than red, and the red will become more purple. In other words, it'll be a darker red, a purple red, and that's a sign of very much stagnation and a rolled nature as it gets more and more rolled. In other words, the edges to expand and be spongy and big. When that happens, that's a sign of qi being stagnant. Now, what happens if it's red, if it's not sort of dark red and purple, if it's bright red? Perhaps there's blisters on the side of the tongue as well. Well, if that happens, that's more a manifestation of heat. That's more an expression of the anger or of the liver qi stagnation rising. And the person's personality for each of those scenarios will probably be completely different, and that's the important thing to note. Because when a person presents to you, they always put their best foot forward. So they're not going to tell you that they are particularly difficult to put up with or that they're volatile, or equally they're not going to tell you that they always compromise and never express their true opinion and are true to themselves. So you're going to have to decide on that yourself, because each requires a different medical approach from both systems of medicine, I suspect, but certainly from an acupuncture medical point of view. So let's look at scenario number one. The person who spends a lifetime with their qi stagnation. They have a massive sense of entrapment, but they feel they can do nothing about it, because if they do something about it, and it'll rock a boat and it'll make things worse in another department. So therefore they prefer to get on with life in as much as they can in the situation in which they find themselves, because at least there's a familiarity with it. If you live with a bully or work with a bully or whatever, there's a familiarity to that, and you learn to adjust and you learn to put up with your particular situation. So your qi will become more and more stagnant. Your tongue will be very rolled around the margins, getting bigger and bigger around the margins, and darker, and there will be purple lines along it, and all that's a sign of a deep stagnation. Now, on the other hand, if a person expresses themselves all the time, if they get away with it, for want of a better word, if they're volatile with their employer or whatever else it might be, at home or wherever, then in that case, and they do get away with it, and everybody runs a mile and everybody tries to be as gentle as possible in their presence, tiptoeing. I think the expression is walking on eggs. Well, then when that happens, the person's qi will just keep powering up and will manifest on the tongue, not as rolled, because it's not kept in. It's expressed, the frustration, the anger, the point of view is expressed robustly by the person, and whether you like it or not. And that therefore means that that person's tongue won't be rolled, because there's no real stagnation there. There's a lot of qi, a lot of liver qi. Liver qi is in abundance, but it's not stagnating. It's being expressed as entering into the yang channels very rapidly without being stored, and powering up the greater yang channels, and maybe also the sanjiao channel as well, so lesser yang channel, and manifesting outwardly in the form of the person expressing themselves. So it doesn't even have an opportunity to express in the person as a migraine or as a tinnitus or as an itchy red eye, or all the usual things that happen when yang rises up in the greater yang channels. This is somebody who expresses themselves, and if you express yourself, then in that case the anger comes out. out. The verbalization of your discomfort or whatever it might be is expressed, it comes out, and therefore it does not manifest clinically in all the various ways you expect liver yang to actually manifest. Because there's none of that, because the person expresses themselves. The person is described as liverish. In other words, they're easily angered. They're easily, to use the expression, rubbed up the wrong way. And people who are close to people like that know that. So you know what to say and you know what not to say. More importantly, what not to say. And you navigate your life gently and gingerly around that sort of situation. And you can become quite expert at that. But it doesn't pay to do so, for the very simple reason the person whose yang is rising will take advantage of that situation, and more yang will rise because the person realizes to get away with it, and they express themselves, and the tongue will become redder and redder and redder on the margins in a bright red way. But if a situation arose in which the person then would become very stagnant, and I've never come across a case like that, because you run true to form at all times. You can't just flip from one sort of type of personality to another. You are who you are. But if a person presented then as somebody who was completely stagnated, then in that case the rolled edges of the tongue would be very, very rolled, very, very obvious, very, very dark, and completely different than the individual whose heart fire is or whose liver fire is blazing. A person, of course, may have heart fire blazing, and that's completely different, and that's on the tip of their tongue, and that's where you find that, and it can be bright red with even prickles, and that's spontaneous, and there's no agenda there. The person simply expresses themselves in a totally spontaneous way, and there can be some good in that as well, until the physiology becomes pathology, of course, and that's heart fire blazing, and a previous tutorial has dealt with that. But here we're talking purely about the liver. We're talking about a person who is, for want of a better word, it has a difficult personality, a long history of falling out with people, a long history of getting their own way. And when that happens, that is liver rising on the greater yang channels and expressing itself in the way the person's expressing themselves, not expressing itself by pathology, such as the migraine and tinnitus and all the things that we refer to. This is something completely different. Whereas the other person who will bottle it all in, the chi will stagnate in the lower jiao, in the middle jiao, in the upper jiao, and eventually it'll enter into some of the greater yang channels and rise up, producing significant pathology generally from the shoulders up, from anything from tight shoulders and plum stone in the throat, right up to an itchy, scratchy scalp at the very top of one's head, and all things in between, because the liver has to escape, has to go somewhere, whereas the other person just expresses it as the liver is manufactured, if you like, as the liver chi energy goes into excess. It isn't stored. It goes right into the channels, right up, and is expressed as verbiage rather than as pathology. So what do you do in both cases? Well, in the liver chi stagnation case, of course, you move chi. You've got to do that. Liver 3, gallbladder 34. I like doing spleen 10 bilaterally as well, because I think when that happens, the person probably has a deep toxic heat in the body as well. Spleen 10 can be very good. Drag down as well, of course. I mean, the pathology is manifesting from the shoulders up. Pull all the spring points down. Gallbladder 43 bilateral, gallbladder, stomach 44 bilaterally, so on and so forth. Pull it all down if you can, because the person usually has a lot of pathology, and it drifts from one greater yang channel into the next over the location of these channels on the face. So it could be, say, a tight sort of masseter muscle, temporomandibular joint pain, which is a stomach issue, or it could be a migraine headache, which of course the liver issue is manifesting in the gallbladder channels, so on and so forth. So that's what you do there. As for the other individual who is simply volatile and gets away with it all, in that case, I suppose taking heat out would take some of the acceleration out. How do you do that? A liver 2, gallbladder 43, of course, would pull down the heat, take out heat deep and toxic. Although, mind you, the person usually doesn't have heat deep and toxic because nothing's stored. It simply comes out and is more a learning issue. So So if you perhaps challenge that person, the difficulty there is he could go into stagnation because he's not getting his own way, and he's used to getting his own way. So regarding a solution, I don't have solutions to personality, but I do have solutions to pathology. And this is more personality than pathology. So I'm afraid if somebody comes to me who's simply extremely volatile simply because their liver is rising up on the gallbladder channel or other channels, and then expressed as verbiage, talking out, giving out, shouting, being unpleasant or whatever it might be, and then be nice a few minutes later, then in that case I don't really have a needle for that. You could try to calm the person down. You do all the usual stuff, obviously, such as pericardium 6. Personally, I think pericardium 7 would probably be a better point there. But this isn't pathology. This is bad behaviour. And there is a difference. I mean, we're clinicians. Our job is to clinically put right pathology. When physiology morphs into pathology, such as chi being stagnant, yes, indeed, then we have a role as acupuncturists regarding bad behaviour. I don't think that falls into our remit. My thoughts. Thank you.